Hello, Camp Pros, and welcome to the CampHacker podcast. My name is Travis Allison. I'm a summer camp marketing and strategy consultant, and I help camps translate what they do so more families can get this experience for their kids. I'd like to welcome my co-host today.
My name is Gabrielle Rail, and I'm one of the camp directors at Camp Waro. Camp Waro is an all-girls camp in the Laurentian Mountains, and we focus on creating a positive female environment, both in French and in English.
And my name's Joe Richards. I'm the executive director at Pierce Williams, which is a summer camp and retreat facility. And we're located in Fingal, Ontario, which is sort of halfway between Detroit and Toronto.
And I'm Ruby Compton. I'm the chief exploration officer for Ruby Outdoors. Basically, that's just saying I'm self-employed, and I work with camps to knock out their to-do lists, as well as plan outdoor adventures in Western North Carolina, where I live.
Awesome. Thank you all for being here. In particular, thanks to Ruby, who many of you know from our Designing Staff Training course and the Be Best Boss Ever Masterclass, and probably even more specifically from her work at Camp Code with Gab and Beth. Ruby, it's great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. It's been a while. It's like 2 jobs ago.
I know. So it's grateful. I'm so glad that you could find time for us in your busy schedule. So Ruby, tell me, what's your passion work these days when it comes to summer camp in particular? What's the stuff you're most excited to be doing?
So I've been about a year into running my own company and working with camps. And one of the things that I've found that I just really love helping people. Like, I love it. And so that's something that has fueled me, is being able to channel my energies and efforts into lots of programs versus just one. And I've even had a few job offers kind of like come across the table where it's like, oh, that's interesting. No, I'm really passionate about continuing to help lots of camps, and just, who better to be able to call and get some help from than another camp director. So we can change the world, I'm pretty sure. So I love just being able to jump in and be that yes person when folks are feeling stressed or don't know what the solution is. And I can be like, no, look, I'll come lifeguard for 2 hours while you figure out what you're going to do about your waterfront breakfast.
Yeah.
Cool. Like, let me just pop in there and you don't have to worry about it. And when I hear camp directors say, it's just so nice to see you walk in the door because I know everything's going to be okay. It's a lot of fun.
That's awesome. Well, we're so grateful to have you here, Ruby. It's a true pleasure, and it's nice. Today we're thinking about a topic at a point that's probably, if not the most stressful point of the year. I think we're sort of at like 8/10 of the most stressful part of the year, and that the most stressful part of the year is either now or shortly coming. And sometimes it's hard to remember why you do what you do, what keeps you going. And so we really wanted to devote this article today to finding hope, to find the things that help each of our co-hosts get through tough times, and also just the inspiration to push each other a little bit further and push ourselves a little bit further, not each other. I mean, of course, the network is the best part for pushing each other, but just pushing ourselves to do a bit better, to take a deep breath and do it again. One of the interesting things about being a longtime camp pro is that every year you're doing the same thing over and over again. So you have this awesome opportunity to tweak it and get better every year. And that's incredibly rare in a job, that you basically get a fresh start every year. And that's exhausting, of course, but important and an awesome opportunity. And so I thought we'd spend today thinking about, when we're recording this on the middle of February, that I want to ask people, where do they find their inspiration? So I want to ask you about your specific inspirations, but I want to think, first of all, where are the places that you look within camp and without? What are the places that you're constantly looking for ideas, things to get you jazzed, etc.? And it can be all sorts of things, but even sort of what you do in your rest time. What do you do for recuperation? And Joe, I wonder if you would start us off. What is the sort of thing, where do you go for inspiration or new ideas?
I have no lack of inspiration or new ideas. We've been doing StrengthsFinder with our staff, and one of the things I've realized is that ideation in the Gallup Strengths is one of my top 5 for sure. And so I'm always that kind of person, and lots of you know this. When you're asking for a brainstorm, you really better be specific about what you're asking for, because I can have a brainstorm by myself and people are like, I didn't get a chance to say anything. Well, you said it's a brainstorm. I think my inspiration really comes from doing things outside of camping that can also relate back. Years ago, when I was doing some keynote talks, I had, and it still comes up occasionally in talks, but I had this story where this will age me. I used to have magazine subscriptions that actually got mailed to my house. And for whatever reason, there was a time when Rolling Stone magazine would arrive in my mailbox, and the same day each month, Discover magazine would arrive in my mailbox, which are two very, very different things. But in my mind, it made sense to read widely. And that's one of my inspirations, is just reading widely and not being stuck only on camper behaviors or stuck on only summer camp and only going to camp conferences. I find a lot of my my inspiration to do more things comes through fiction books. And there's lots of people who don't read fiction now. They put a lot of value on reading nonfiction because I have to learn something. And the reality is that fiction allows your mind to wander and make connections. And fiction allows you to be like, oh, this situation is like this other situation. And even though it's fictional, I still know how I can handle that and strategize for it. And so a lot of mine is reading online. I use Pocket a lot to store the articles I want to read. I use Feedly as a feed, and I add things, but at the same time, you have to want to remove them as well.
Right. And I want to get back to your tools, definitely, Joe. But I just want to just get your mindset on that. So thank you for starting us off there, Ruby. What's your thinking? Where are you searching for inspiration and sustainability in your career?
Sure. I remember so specifically when I first started working in outdoor education and the feeling that I had when I was learning so many new things. Like I started in outdoor education having not taken biology since freshman year of high school, didn't have a lot of ecology or environmental sciences training. And so I was learning all the plants and learning the ecosystem and learning these animals and learning these habits. And I was just like, oh, this is awesome. And so I am totally guilty of I always want to be learning something. And if I'm not learning something, I want to go seek out something to find a new skill to add. I listen to a lot of podcasts. Anybody who has ever spent any time with me has heard me say, so I was listening to this podcast. I also read Wired magazine, and I still get a physical copy of it. And it's a great blend of pop culture, tech, and just kind of what's going on. But they also do some hard news stories as well that I think are helpful for keeping in tune with what is going on in the rest of the world. And I think that in a lot of ways is the inspiration for me is paying attention to the news, paying attention to current events. And, right now is a tough time with that stuff. And so to then be able to see what's going on out there and going, oh, but camp can help do this, or, oh, this company is innovating in this way. Cool. How does that apply to camp? I feel like that's kind of a default setting for me.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you. Gab, for you, where's the inspiration come from? Where are you searching?
I think in the inspiration, it's maybe it's not so much inspiration, but I think that with Ruby was talking about current events. I think that we understand that what we do at camp has a lasting impact, and I think that one of the things that helps me every day is knowing that what I do at camp can make a difference. And so I'm looking at what other organizations are doing, and I'll be honest, some of my anxiety is what inspires me to look at how other companies, organizations, people that have a platform, how do they use it? How do they use it responsibly? And for me, it's constantly looking outside of the camp industry. I've mentioned this before, but Jamie Oliver was, multimillionaire, had every line possible in the cooking industry, and he realized that kids in England weren't eating as well as they could. That that obesity was going up, that families were starving in malnutrition, and he took it upon himself and educated himself. How can he help adjust this? And he documented it, and he made some mistakes along the way, and he did some great things along the way, but he understood that he had a platform and that he had a responsibility. And for me, those are the type of things that I find inspiring. It feels like we're not doing it by ourselves, so how can we learn from those individuals? How can we emulate it? But I follow feeds like on Instagram, Representation Matters, because of them, looking at how communities lift each other up and understand communities that are not necessarily part of my community, just so I'm better educated. But my inspirations really comes from a little bit of an anxiety of we need to do better, and how can we? I have a platform at camp, so what can I do, and how can I be responsible while implementing some of those changes?
Yeah, and it's an intimidating idea, but I think it's one of the great, responsibility obviously, but one of the great opportunities of what we do is that we can have a real effect on people. We can have an effect on young adults, and we can have an effect on kids as well. We can have an effect on families in lots of ways, sending kids back with different ideas. And I think the camp movement, helped spread a lot of environmentalism into the home in the past, and a lot of work on quality has come out of the camp movement and come into the home from that way. So that's pretty great part of our job, yet intimidating.
And it's exciting. It's not, and I said anxiety, but the what helps me get through it is that those opportunities and those possibilities, and working with my staff and asking them what we want to focus on, and the buy-in on our staff and our campers is so high. But just even teaching people how to be kinder to each other and listen to each other, it just feels like such an important role that we have, and can really make a difference. And I think for me, that's what's inspiring. That's what's exciting, that possibility within our jobs that we can do that really gets me going in the morning.
Awesome.
I think part of the other thing is this inspiration can happen being a more local camp, where a lot of our campers are local and their parents are local. I made the specific point just the other day, I needed to get my oil changed, and I know I have a previous staff member who manages at like one of the quick oil places in town, who I fired many years ago, but has come back to me since then and said that was one of the best things that had happened, because it was a kick in the seat of the pants. And his daughter comes to camp, and I didn't chat with him for a long time at the oil place, but I just said, "Hey, how is Ellison doing?" Now, he doesn't need to know that I had to look up Ellison's name on the way to the oil place, but like that story goes home and is powerful, because you're spreading the inspiration not only to him, but to his daughter, who thinks, wow, like Joe knew who I was. I think inspiration, I like the anxiety piece, and I've gotten way far off of social media because I think that this deep thinking piece is also important, right? Once we put those things together, be it the local news, or I think the deep thinking piece for me is certainly where I get some of that inspiration.
I just want to pick up on that one thing, Joe. Like you're saying, like he didn't know that I looked her up, but to me, I mean, if we want a parent to understand that their kid's important enough, if that parent knew that even that you took the time to look that up, I think that that's a level of intention that you wouldn't get in other industries. And I often think back to Indian Summer with the Uncle Lou trick of looking at the name tag in the back of the shirt. Or which is a trick I'm sure every camp counselor or camp director has used at some point when there are just so many faces. But I think that that's a level of intentionality you just don't find in other places. Certainly, I think you find it in other people that work with kids and young teens, but it's something special about what we do that you would take the time to do that.
But I think sometimes we as an industry are too navel gazing. We look at there's tons of people who only focus on camp, and they believe, younger people and older people, but they believe that the only focus is camp, right? So I only need to think about camp. I only need to think about camp. And the reality is we're limiting ourselves, because looking for what's ahead, what's next, what will make camp continue on for the next 120 years is really the key to longevity. And that's when you asked at the beginning, Travis, this idea of what keeps you inspired to do what you do all the time. It's really this, that I'm looking for what's next. I have a very unique situation where I can, as long as I don't mess up, I can try and experiment with those what's next things. And hopefully, we as industry professionals and the four of us sitting on this podcast are certainly well respected by some, not respected by others, and that's totally fine. Because one of the things I've learned is if I'm going to try to change things, or if I'm always going to be honest with people, some people don't want your honesty. They don't want to know that they suck or that their camp is questionable, or that them as a person is not someone I would hang out with. But when you're honest with people, it can cause divisions. But moving forward, you really need to focus on outside of ourselves, because if we don't see how we're connected to the Wireds and to the Wired articles or the Fast Company or where things go, we're going to be left behind.
Yep. And I think that you brought up something that I really wanted to draw into this today, Joe. So thank you for that. When we look at summer camp, we're a pretty cautious industry for all the right reasons. But that means that there are lots of places where we can learn lessons. Those of us who think about the business side of camp and some of the strategic stuff know that camp is 5 to 10 years behind what some other industries are doing. So there's so many opportunities for camps to look outside of, as Joe says, or looking outside of just camp. So many opportunities for leadership when you can look outside and see this is where things going. Here's a totally different style of leadership that's being developed in this very big company. And other people are doing the experiments for us. We have to adopt them and do our own experiments, but the experiments are being done. And I think your point's a great one, Joe. We really need to not just look at the camp industry, but think where are the other places that are growing and develop that touch on pieces of what we do. So Ruby, what specifically now? No, I want to do tools. What are the tools before the places? What are the things? So you talked about podcasts. Mm-hmm. How are you discovering? No, tell me something very specific. How do you listen to podcasts?
All the time. So I do a lot of podcasts in the car. I listen to podcasts, especially in the summer when I'm mowing my grass and just doing tasks around the house. And I float in and out with podcasts. Like there are some that I will listen to really faithfully for a couple of months and then kind of drop off and not listen to them for a while. So that's okay. Don't feel like you have to read every chapter, right? Like don't get the guilt about, I haven't listened to this podcast in 3 months. Like most of them you can pick right up and keep going. And a lot of stuff outside the industry. I mean, I dabble in CampHacker and, occasionally go back and listen to Camp Code, but mostly I'm listening to business podcasts. I know you've probably mentioned the Building a Story Brand podcast because you're the one that brought that to me. I listen to that one pretty faithfully. And then Outside In, which is a podcast from New Hampshire Public Radio that is just about outside stuff and environmentalism. And it's fascinating. It's very well done. And then I love the Dirtbag Diaries and She Explores that just tell stories of people's experiences outdoors. Cause that's so much of what I'm trying to create in taking folks and getting people to come to Western North Carolina and explore and play. Like what makes an experience, what makes something memorable. That is the economy that we are going into, is the experience economy versus like the goods. Cause people have what they want, but they still don't feel fulfilled. So how do we create those experiences? And I think by hearing other people's stories, that's a big thing. And then it's also having friends that are thinkers and readers and are going to be the ones who are going to pick up books and things and listen to podcasts that I'm never going to. And I make sure I go out and see them periodically and engage in fantastic conversations and find out what they're reading and what they're thinking about. That always puts more ideas in my head too.
Awesome. And very specifically, what app do you use for podcasts?
I have an iPhone. I don't love it, so I'm using just like the iTunes the podcast app that's on there.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Joe, you're a podcast listener too. What app do you use for podcasts? Dude, you're muted.
I use Pocket Cast for my iPhone or for my listening. I have a Pixel 3 XL. Like looking at them, so on Pocket Cast, it sets which ones I download that I allow to download automatically. The other ones I have to choose. So like 99% Invisible by Roman Mars comes in automatically. Radiolab comes in. Cool Tools comes in. Zigzag is a great podcast, especially for the female listeners out there. It follows Manoush Emirati from Note to Self when she moved away from WNYC. The whole first season is about Bitcoin, and if you know zero things about cryptocurrency, it is a great primer to be like, oh, because, yeah. So anyway, I'm not going to talk about cryptocurrency right now. And then recently I've subscribed to a bunch of Enneagram podcasts because I attended an Enneagram retreat in Niagara Falls a couple of weeks ago. And yeah, I have like the Daily by New York Times, but I only download them when I'm interested in the topic they're going to discuss. And I have Keto podcast because I've been eating keto for over a year now. So that is the app I use, and I have that app's been on my phone for a while. I used to use a different one. Yeah.
I love Pocket Casts too. It might be one you can get on Apple, Ruby. I like it because it allows me to pick stuff. So if I just want to listen to the news in the morning, I just get up and hit play all of the news and then just listen to as much of those as I can. And I try to pull in some different sources. And I also like it because it'll allow me to keep only certain numbers of shows from a particular thing. So I have, I don't need the hourly CBC News. I don't need 24 of them before I listen again in the morning. I only need one. So it'll drop out the old ones and replace it with the new ones. And some shows I like to have like 2 or 3 of them around just for when I'm in a particular mood for that one. I don't need to, catch up all the way on all those things.
So the other part to this is all of those news shows, so be it a CNN Minute or Fast Company or anything that's a short, really time span, I actually use the Google Assistant for that. And so I would say, hey, Google, play me the news, which is about to happen. And so then it has Sports Center and CBC News and yeah, I'll just mute that. And a BBC Minute and Fast Company. And so that updates, Travis. So I get the latest news if I want to listen to it. I don't go here first. In the mornings, though, I should.
Cool. It just gives people a couple of podcasts, and since we're on the topic, I have been listening to Planet Money. It took me a long time to get into Planet Money. I know lots of people have been into it for a really long time. I listened to The Turnaround by Jesse Thorne, which only comes out really sporadically, but it talks about interview skills and has been fascinating as a podcaster and someone who's interested in doing some interviewing stuff. I think You're Interesting is a cool one. I like interview shows more and more these days. The Ezra Klein show I get a lot out of these days. And those are sort of some of the things that I think help stretch me. I'm also into 99% Invisible. Invisibilia, Code Switch, Nancy, The Waves podcast, stuff like that, just for some perspective stretching things.
Well, and Travis, one of the things is that podcasts allow you a very different view. So there's one called Reveal, which is not something, and it's just deep dives into topics that I would never, like where they're digging behind the scenes. And I'm like, oh, that's fascinating.
Right. Gab, do you listen to podcasts at all?
I do. I like a friend's suggest podcasts for me, and I really enjoy that because then I know it's like a book. I need somebody to say, this book, you'll really like it, but wait till page 50 because, or else I'm over it. So I just listened to Getting Curious with Jonathan from Queer Eye, but he interviews the specific episode. He interviews Katie Couric, and she talks about just her journey, as a reporter, her responsibility. And she talks about empathy, which I find really interesting. And that's what she finds her biggest strength as a reporter is to try to understand where somebody's coming from and to help them tell their story. And then because of her empathy, she feels she's able to also help them see somebody else's story. So I find that's great. Query's great. I also listen to The Daily. I do want to know what's going on in the world. I am interested in American politics, and I find that The Daily helps. They do a really good job at showing all the angles and explain things really clearly. And I don't listen to the news, and I really try to curate that in a certain way. And then there's a whole bunch of other really cool stuff like Two Dope Queens, which I'm listening to right now. Two Dope Queens, which I think they're hilarious comedians, but they're very kind to each other as well. So it's podcasts are it's just another way of exposing yourself to different stories, to how people do things differently, and of course in the back of your mind you can't help but think, oh, I listen to also Bad with Money with Gabby Dunn because I am also bad with money, but it can't help you think about how can you apply this. Can you apply this at camp? Can you apply this to your own life? Do you want staff members to listen to these podcasts? What are staff listening to? So I do enjoy podcasts. And it's a great way to help you clean your house as well. Have that in the background.
Yes, indeed. Such a nice passive way to get some insight in the world or some news of the world when you're doing other things. I also tend to have my headphones on all day long so that when I move from my desk to upstairs, I'll listen to a podcast for that a couple of minutes. I just get that stuff in as much as possible. It's a medium I enjoy terribly.
Travis, do you put audiobooks into that same... Would you consider audiobooks in that same category as podcasts?
I would. And I want to talk about audiobooks in just a second. Gab, what app do you use for podcasts? Is it the Apple one?
Yeah, straight up podcast on Apple. But I want to change because I feel like it doesn't curate it the way I want to, and it goes backwards instead of forwards. So when you're done a show, it'll go to the previous show instead of the next show, and I don't like that.
Yeah, gotcha.
I find it annoying. So,
Gab, do you ever listen to books?
All the time. I love Audible, and I say that's how I read. That's my only way of reading. I do buy books, and I find it interesting that I still buy books because I don't read books. I think I'm romantic about books. I'm like, oh, I'm going to have this book. I'm going to in bed curl up and read this book, and that just never happened. So I do listen to Audible, and I'm trying to think of all the books that I'm listening to right now. But there's one, Mating Within Captivity. Esther, can't remember her last name.
Perel?
Yes, Esther Perel. So there's podcasts with Esther Perel. She's a well-known couples therapist. And it's really about relationships. And I'm currently not in a relationship. And so what I'm saying is that it applies in the sense of understanding how people, their perspective, and how complex we all are, and trying to understand each other. And she does a brilliant job of facilitating conversation. And as an individual, she has quite an interesting past life and why she chooses to help people with love. And her partner, actually, he's a psychiatrist, and he deals with people that live with trauma. And so she says that he deals with pain and she deals with pleasure. But she's a phenomenal lady, and I'm loving what she has to say right now. That's sort of my top pick at the moment.
Great, thank you so much. Joe, you want to talk about audiobooks?
Yeah, I was just wondering because I use Audible as well, but I've also started using Libby, which is my local library's online system. So you can get digital books to read, like a Kindle, on the Libby app. And then my Matt Iskis, our producer, recommended Boys Adrift, and I was like, man, I could get that on Audible, or I could see if Libby has it as an audiobook, and sure enough, they do, right? So it was great. I love listening to a variety of books as I drive or as I do, like woodworking is great because as long as I can focus, because saws are dangerous, as long as I can focus, I love listening to podcasts or books when I'm doing that. The one thing I've done a deep dive into almost all of Neil Gaiman's audiobooks because he reads his own audiobooks, which is fascinating to hear him.
He's so great at it.
And he also has a nonfiction book of essays and talks that he's given at graduations. And it is amazing to read amazing to listen to and read how he equates the lack of reading nonfiction to problems in our education system, right? The idea that we're taking too much from a just need to know. And Boys Adrift, which I just started yesterday, goes over the same thing. The fact that we're putting too much emphasis on knowledge instead of on experiential, like actually doing stuff. So I love audiobooks. Audible and Libby are the ones I use.
Very cool. How about you, Ruby?
I'm going to be the odd one out. I do not listen to audiobooks. They just do not connect with me. And as we've been talking, I'm curious, did y'all read as a child? Was like, that's something you enjoyed? Like, would you opt to go pick up a book and curl up and read for hours?
For sure.
4 hours.
Lord of the Rings, done all 3 books in less than 3 days.
Yeah. I think if reading for me was easier, that's insane. That is insane.
I had
Are
mono,
you kidding?
so I had nothing else to do.
You gotta do
Like I had 0 other things to do.
Aren't you sleepy during mono?
Not like on day 6, right? Like you've slept for 20 hours a day, and then you're like, I can't get up and do anything, and there's no internet to keep you entertained, and it's all daytime talk show TV in the 90s.
Yeah.
So, Gab, you were saying?
Oh, I was saying. Oh, I it's just because of my learning difference that I can't read. I can't absorb the information that way. So I will read the same paragraph over and over and over again. And when I was a kid, I did read. I tried to read some philosophy books, which I took from the library that wasn't checked out since 1970 something. And I loved it, but for me, it's like a portal to the information I never had as a kid, basically. But if I could read like that, I would definitely.
Okay, so great. The theory I had is totally debunked, which was I was like, well, maybe for me, I love curling up with a book. And I remember when I was a senior in college and I had a lighter course load. And so I was finally able to read for pleasure again. And it was like, oh, this is amazing. So I think that's a piece of it. Like I really love the physical, picking up the book, reading through it, curling up in a corner, sitting in a place and doing it. I love that. So I think that's what I enjoy, and I get pleasure out of that process. And so that's why I've connected more to reading. And I've read on Kindles too, and I've found that I can have a pretty similar experience. So, and I forget that libraries exist periodically. Mm-hmm. So don't forget your library, because they do. And they are, I feel like, keeping up with the digital revolution and staying relevant that way, which is great.
Yeah.
Well, that's another inspiration is libraries. How are they staying relevant? And they are. I know in Quebec, there's been a lot of money going to our libraries, and the innovation that has happened within libraries in an architectural sense, in a learning sense, in creating space for businesses to meet. It's quite impressive, and to stay relevant. I can feel when I go into the library, this is something that our communities still need. And I think that back to the reading aspect, and maybe this is more for Travis and Joe, but I love, it's going to sound weird, but I love being around people that are actually physically reading. So if you're reading in a chair, Ruby, I would just want to just sort of sit close because I feel the energy shifts in a person when they read. And I like to just paint during that time, or just, it helps me keep calm. Whereas if I'm listening to an audio book or a podcast, the energy feels different to me. But I don't know if Travis or Joe, if that's something that changes for you, if you feel you're in the same mindset when you're listening to when you're actually reading.
Well, for me, audiobooks, I have a hard time reading business books or learning through audiobooks. Not because I don't enjoy the medium or not because it doesn't catch for me, but sometimes I just don't find it relaxing. Like, and I feel like I need to be taking notes. Whereas if I was reading a business book, I could be scribbling in it. And books are not holy to me. I dog ear them, I scribble on them. Like that makes them useful to me going forward. So I can't. I have a hard time doing that. And there's certain podcasts that I've had to just give up because they're too useful, that they're more stress inducing than they are giving me, slow knowledge that I can ponder. And Storybrand is one of those podcasts. I have to come out in pieces because I need to be at a spot where I can take notes or really think through the thing. It's not a casual cut the grass and listen to 7 Storybrands, because each one of them I'm like, oh man, so many good ideas. I want to take note of those. So I do get that same relaxation listening to novels. It can put me into that same kind of zone quite easily and make other things that are not relaxing. So I think I find some of that.
So I think that audiobooks recently have turned into short story audiobooks because there are much less. So Neil Gaiman has a whole bunch of collections of short stories that are great. And his stuff is easy to follow, even if it's not a short story. Like Ursula K. Le Guin on audio is awesome to listen to as well. So I have no issues. And I do feel like if I can do woodworking while I'm doing that, both of those things relax me, except for the anxiety producing of a table saw blade. 10 fingers, people. Can't wait until the time I come and I'm like, I only have 9. No, and I think that there is a portion. So I do try to start my day a couple of times a week with sitting and reading a physical thing, be it a book or be it on my phone or on my Kindle, but literally sitting with a cup of tea on the couch with nothing else on, because that does give you a different sense. My wife, Jen, does it all the time. She reads what I call mindless books, but that is her thing. But she can also burn through a book in, like 5 hours and just be done books. And she will sit for hours and just get absorbed in that. And it is, when she's reading, you want to be quiet, right? Like it does change the effect in the house, because our kids are more quiet. And I'm like, I don't want to disturb her because she looks happy. And if she's happy, then I'm happy. It's Valentine's Day, everybody. So that's a good thing. Happy Valentine's.
So we've touched on some of these things. Actually, I'm going to come to that later. What are some of the campy things that, Ruby, you touched on some of the podcasts you listen to that are outdoorsy, but I'm curious if people know camp inspiration, where they look at, what they do to sustain themselves or be inspired to do more. What are the things? I'll let you folks think about it while I talk about mine. And this works differently. Some accreditation programs work differently, but in Ontario, the accreditation visits are done by volunteer directors who go to another camp and look through all the stuff. So you always have this opportunity to go to another camp when camp is going and see it. And we always used to make a point of trying, asking if we could bring a senior staff member with us, because we want them to have a different perspective. And certainly if there's someone that we thought had a future in the industry or had expressed a future in the industry, we wanted to expose them to more camps. That for me was always a big inspiration. Like some people solving the same problems that we're struggling with, it just like, boom, they have a solution. That is awesome. A great part of my job now is getting to go to camps to do photography for them, and or going to be a sort of staff and program evaluator, an outside pair of eyes. That has been really had such a huge impact on how I think about the world of camp and how I think about the possibilities when I see so many different solutions. It's just why Camp Bros started, because it's like there are so many people doing so many solutions, and we need to be sharing this more. People are eager to be sharing and eager to be absorbing some of these things. So that's why that's important. So I would say Summer Camp Professionals on Facebook, it is a fire hose of information. I get that, but that's valuable if you're good at searching. And and going to visit camps. Those are my two big camp inspiration moments, the two things that I am consistently doing because it matters so much to how I grow as a camp professional. Are there other camp inspirations for you, Ruby?
Yeah, I mean, I would second the visitor piece. I think once you become a camp director, you should become an accreditation visitor, just 100%, whether your camp is accredited or not. And now I actually teach the classes that have people become visitors and learn about the program. And you just get exposed to so many different ideas. I think one of the strategies I've been using lately is really trying to dig into camps that are drastically different from the programs that I ever worked in and are working with. And so like lately I've taken a real interest in urban and just like non-traditional model camps. And part of that is having conversations with folks who've been in my classes who are like, well, my camp isn't really like anybody else's. And I'm like, no, actually there's a whole community of people who say that to me. Let's get you guys together so you can talk. Because what is needed to train a child who is entering this world, like, yeah, they need to know how to navigate public transit, and they need to know how to visit a museum. And I think that skill is equally as valuable as how to start a fire or put up a tent. And so how cool that we have folks that have figured that out and are doing that. So I think taking opportunities to not only look at camps that are similar to yours, doing similar programming in the same area, but taking time to look at camps that are very, very different. Maybe even some camps that you're like, I don't know if that's a camp. Like, do they get to call themselves a camp? I think you need to go check into that because they're probably doing something really well that you haven't thought of, you aren't doing, and maybe even closing yourself off to certain populations because you're not in tune with what they're doing.
Perfect. Thank you. How about you, Gab?
I was just going to say, I love what you said, Ruby, about kids taking the metro or the subway, public transportation, using those skills, learning those skills at camp. And I think that we limit ourselves to a typical type of visual when we think about camp skills. And I think for people that aren't from the camp community, it's difficult for them to visualize why would canoeing be something that is useful for my kid. And if we can just get our heads out of what we think camp can do and just boil it down to the essence of we're providing skills for young people and we're teaching them to use those skills in an ethical way. If we just pare that down to something like that, that's what we do at camp. And so for me, within the camp industry, it is just talking to people that are passionate about camp, that they're passionate about that essence. And I try to make time in my schedule to meet with them. So, I had dinner with a friend last night who was also a camp director. And our goal isn't to speak about camp. Our goal is to check in with each other and have a nice dinner. Inevitably, we do end up talking about camp. But it's sort of a cone of silence, a safety bubble, if you will, of talking about.
So awesome.
How do you feel? Our camp lost 14 staff last year that quit throughout the summer. So that's a whole other podcast. And she asked me about how was I doing with that? Am I nervous about going into the summer? And I totally forgot about that we lost those 14 staff members. And she laughed and she was like, she's like, I think camp's like childbirth. Like you just don't remember the horrible and it's what allows you to keep going forward. And just having somebody understand that and understand how tough that might have been as much, and so much so that I blocked it out, and asking me about how, what am I doing to prepare for this summer, and her sharing her story about when she lost a bunch of staff and how did that happen and what did that do to her, is so helpful. And it's not just somebody to lean on, but it is inspiring. It's exciting to hear how she deals with things. I think vice versa. And just Ruby, what you said inspired me. I was like, yes, let's think outside the box. But it's just having these exchanges and making time to have these exchanges.
And a resource that I am only like just getting into the world of is the International Camping Fellowship, like the ICF, and my trip to Mongolia to see like, oh, these are kids who are being raised outdoors. So when they come to camp, they want to be in dorms, like that is an escape. That is where you create these different experiences for them, was a total mind shift adjustment for me. So that's a resource that, truthfully, and I'll say as an American, like I was like, oh yeah, okay, international camping, that's over there. Like, I think we've got what we need. And then just dabbling my toe in it, my eyes have been open to so many different ideas and methods, and yet this really cool thing where you're like, oh my gosh, we're all doing the same thing everywhere. So cool.
100%. The ICF is a great form of information and inspiration. And talk about a group of people that have a common goal but do it differently, and what we can use and how we can adapt that within our own organizations is, I mean, just a quick example, just in Venezuela, a camp director approached a large company and offered that company as a bonus to their staff members, their kids to go to summer camp for X amount of weeks during the summer, and as a business plan. And it was so popular that he couldn't fill all, his spots were all filled. So he had to get neighboring camps to do the same things. And for these companies, this was very useful because, like us, what do kids do during the summer? And this is helpful for parents to know that their kids are going to a place where they're growing and learning. And that model just blew my mind. I just heard him talk about it over dinner, saying this is what we've done and this is how we've done it and this is how we grew. And he was helping the community out. It was absolutely beautiful. And I thought, wow, we really have a lot to learn from each other.
What do you think, Joseph?
I think that what you said about camp visits for your association are great, and that was a real starting point for me. This podcast has been an eye-opener. When we first started, which seems like a long, long time ago, we had some guests that really opened up this idea
9 years ago, Joe. 9 years.
Yeah.
We've basically been through 10 summers together as a team.
Oh, so sweet.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Yes.
And so one of the things I've done with my education funds is I have toured camps. I don't just go and visit them. Ruby was great enough. Was that 4 years ago, maybe?
Yeah, 3 years ago.
She actually has she would have the itinerary on her computer as well. But myself and Ika went down to North Carolina and toured some North Carolina and South Carolina camps. And the year before that, we'd been at Ferncliff with David and toured camps in Arkansas. And part of this started with the idea that I went to Australia on my sabbatical in 2013 and did 15 different outdoor ed / summer camps across Australia. And it really is so much better for me to do that than sit at a conference and listen to people talk. Because it's eye-opening and it forces connections to me, and that keeps me motivated to see somebody else doing something. You're like, is that site-specific, or can I do that? Or how can I bring this back? And sometimes it's small things. Last night we were at the London Camp Fair here in Ontario, which was very sparsely attended due to weather, but great people came through. And the one camp, Circle R, was talking about building a beach volleyball court. And I said, hey, Camp Henry in Point Pelee Provincial Park has a great, they put 4x4s in Big O pipe to delineate where the sand is versus where the grass is. And I was like, that's brilliant. And so it's those small things. And I had a picture on my phone. And so those visits and actually making it, doing your own sort of support group. So this afternoon, I have a phone call with a couple of other gentlemen who are camp people or were recently camp people. And just to talk about where we're at. And because that stress, it can affect you. Camp sneaks up on me every year, right? I've been doing this for how many years? And like June comes around and you're like, how did this happen again? Like I thought that I had made notes last year to say I should do all of these things in December. But I think seeing other people, going to camp conferences and networking. So in Ontario, the Society of Camp Directors is part of this as well, right? That I don't need to drive 2.5 hours to Toronto 2 times a year, but I get to see people that I wouldn't normally get to see, and I get to chat with people and talk about things that they understand that a lot of people don't understand who aren't in our business.
Excellent, thank you. So my final topic on this, my final question on this is, what is the thing you do for fun when you need to put camp out of your brain? Joe?
Sometimes I play with explosive things or light big fires. Things that cause you to think. So I own 7 potato cannons because you can never get the design of a potato cannon quite right. And I have different barrels for my potato cannons so that I can fire things like bottles of liquid. Full bottles of liquid can go a full 300-400 feet if you, and then there's compressed air cannons versus lighting cannons. I do that for fun. I do like some simple things, like going to the movies by myself is something. And when I first watched Mad Men many years ago and realized that Don Draper, that's one of the things he did was go to the movies by himself, I was like, oh, so yeah, it's just, for me, I'd been doing it for years before that. For me, it's a way to let things, nobody can contact me. My phone is off. But my mind can still work through things in story. And this is, once again, the power of fiction over just nonfiction. What else do I do for fun? Yeah.
That's good. Those are some great ideas for people. How about for you, Ruby?
I'm trying not to be so cliche, but I go outside, do various things. Geocaching is one of them. And
nice.
Something I used to do a ton of. And then I moved to Western North Carolina where there's so many other things to do that it kind of fell out of that habit. But then recently went out again and was like, oh, this is so fun. I love this. So that's definitely something I do. Joe, you said go to the movies. Like, yeah, take myself on dates. It's great. Like, I get to do what I want, choose what I want. It's awesome. But so it's hard to think about anything else other than the YouTube video and the supplies that I need to make that happen. So those are a few of the things.
Sorry, Ruby, you cut out just a little bit. What was the thing you do with YouTube?
Just like watching YouTube videos to help me do house projects.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of focus for me. I'm not as crafty and handy minded as other folks on this podcast might be. So it takes a lot of work.
It's so funny. I mean, a lot of people use YouTube for lots of things, and I think YouTube is actually one of my big inspirations that I didn't think to mention. Just people who are very creative and thoughtful and great at teaching, so passionate about teaching on YouTube. I was at the car dealership today to get a funny little part that's fiddly to put on. It's just a rear wiper blade on a Toyota car. And they're like, you bring it in, I'll do it for you. It's like, in my head, I was like, isn't that what YouTube's for? Like, I can do this. I just have to watch YouTube. And that's a lot of my life. It's like, I know the answer to this is on YouTube somewhere. So I would say that my things I do always involves building or creating. That's my biggest release. I draw. It's something I made myself do. I draw a portrait for my wife every year in the holidays. She has a little book that I gave her when we first got married. And that's a creative outlet that I love, but I have to force myself to do it. I know that I'm a pretty good drawer, but portraits are the hard part. So I made myself do that because it's stretchy for me. But I love building stuff. It's fun when I'm at conferences and I have my wooden name tag that I made on a scroll saw. People are like, hey, that name tag's so cool. And they're always so surprised that I designed it and made it. And I think as a camp director, you have to find time for hobbies like that. And I didn't take as much time for that when I was a camp director. I had other little hobbies that I could fit in, but that's fun to make things, Lego things and wooden things like that. Those are places that give me energy and help me just build up myself to take on other big hard tasks.
Yeah, Travis, and I would like to give a shout out to, like, Mark Cooper was a big inspiration for me because Mark Cooper has been on the podcast, does art, and then I started playing with, recently in the past couple of years, I've moved to starting to play with some art stuff. I don't see the piece in the background of Gabz, but I know she owns a piece of original.
It's in my cabin, hanging up above the fireplace.
Just so that if it burns, it's going to burn well. But like this idea that you are just doing something for there's no real outcome, right? You're not making something to sell. You're just playing with art, right? And that is a different thing altogether, just relaxing. Yeah.
Yeah. Gab, what are your go-tos for shutting off, building yourself up, stretching yourself?
I like what Joe said. I think not having an end result in mind is what's really nice. And I think that I'm very, very, and a lot of us are very end result driven. How is this going to affect this? How am I going to deal with that? And taking a break from no end result is really helpful. So I also like I like using water paints because they're so forgiving, because they're messy. I like going to museums. I do like going to to movies, but I think it's maybe just having that space and that time and saying, what do I feel like doing right now? And that's something that I'm training myself to do, is not, this is what I should do. I should go to the museum, or it's more like, here's my space and what do I feel like? And then of course that also applies to carving out longer periods of time to take a vacation. And if you own your own business, you can always just keep working and working and working. And I had a work weekend this weekend, and one of my staff members, who's an engineer, she was quote unquote took vacation, and the amount of times her work phone just kept blowing up, and her just basically turning it off. And she told me about her boss who went on a cruise vacation with their family, and how he was on the phone the entire time, and how she found that so depressing. I try not to do that, but I'm not great at it. And so I really put in my mind, right, I also want to make sure that when I take time, it's really, as Joe says, when you go to the movies, your phone is off. When you go on vacation, everything is notified and saying you're off. And so that you can just focus on what you feel like at that moment. That's my goal, to take time to myself.
And I think also for this group, what you said inspired that, Gab, is travel is so fulfilling. It's challenging. You feel like you've accomplished so much. You feel like you have so much new perspective. That is such an energy building thing for me. I certainly love a day here and there to just watch Netflix all day. But the things that I find most inspiring and recharging are those moments of getting out in the world and seeing new things and learning. We've all said over and over again, we get energy from learning. And I think that's a cool perspective to have as a camp leader. You have to keep learning to keep relevant. And if you can enjoy it, then that makes it a lot better. And I think in this modern world, if you can't find a way to enjoy learning, you're just not trying hard enough. Like there's so many different options. I don't mean that as a cuss. I just mean there are just different ways to learn now that weren't available just 10 years ago, that so many cool things to do.
And I think it's if you're not interested in learning, it's asking yourself, why is that? Because if that's the case, then chances are you're having a difficult in your job as well, because to keep up, especially in our domain with campers and staff members, their cultural environment is always shifting, and we have to keep up with that. But I think there's something much deeper when it comes to hobbies, and it comes to taking time to yourself. I think a lot of camp individuals, some camp people live at camp. They have their family at camp. And so your identity can be linked to that. And so how do you separate yourself? You're not this job. You're not this camp. You'll be okay if you have to leave this organization. So who are you, and how do you honor yourself? How do you take time to yourself? And how do you separate yourself from the job? Because it is a job. It's not a relationship. It's not part of who you are. It's something that you care about. But that can shift. So having these other aspects helps you think about your job and think about if is this right for you? Is this, yeah.
Yeah, one of the things I realized, Gab, is when I lived on site, I moved here in 2005, and we didn't have anywhere else to go for years. And we bought a house down by Rondo Provincial Park on Lake Erie. And let me tell you, when you go to the lake, when you go somewhere away from camp, you can shut your mind off, but it also allows yourself to think more about what you do and why you do it. I know that Travis has received video, like minutes from the lake, me sitting on a beach thinking about summer camp. And, and it's just one of those things where it's a different environment. And if you never remove yourself from it, both physically and mentally, right? If all you think about is camp, and you think that I'm going to be more productive and do camp better, then you're not allowing yourself that freedom to develop something else that would make you a better camp person.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. I really appreciate this discussion. And for those of you listening or watching on YouTube, we encourage you to check out some of these things. Most important, and we're going to give Matt a big assignment with this particular podcast edit and show notes. Go to camphacker.tv/podcast and look this up. This is episode 112. And you will see links to all of these things that we've been talking about. Thank you, Matt, for putting in that extra time to pull that together. But there are I was thinking back through the podcasts we've done in our 9 years of doing CampHacker. We've done 3 or 4 different shows on sustainability in the industry. So I would encourage you to look back through those and find the ones, if you're struggling. There are other inspirations and ideas that we've had co-host show that I'm really thrilled that exist in CampHacker land. So go check out those as well. So thank you to the 3 of you for sharing those great things. Now I'll move us on to our tool of the week. So if you happen to catch this as the first time, if you're a first-time CampHacker listener, our tool of the week is something that we ask our co-host to bring to this that makes them a better camp director. Feel like we've done a whole episode, not on tools, but on things that make you a better camp director. So this a few more little specifics in that. So Ruby, I'd like to start with you. What's your tool of the week this week?
Sure. So I do a lot of facilitation now and speaking with groups large and small. And I actually got this tool from a facilitator that came and worked with us at Green River. And I was like, this is brilliant. And it's just simply a yoga chime. You can find them on Amazon for, $30 or less. And it's essentially like a little wood block that has 3 different chimes on it. Think like a glockenspiel or xylophone, right? It comes with a little wooden mallet, and it's a nice high pitched but pleasant sound that if you front load with everybody, hey, when you hear this sound, stop talking, turn your attention up this way. It's one more way to grab attention without having to raise your hand or do a call and response. And easy, comes with a little pouch that I just throw in my bag, and it's just a really easy tool to utilize with groups.
Very cool. Thank you, Ruby.
Mm-hmm.
Joe, what's your tool?
Muted. I am unmuted now. My tool is the time timer. I'm just going to show everyone who's watching. So the time timer is a time clock that counts down time. So I use it especially in doing trainings with groups. And so when I say you have 5 minutes to do this, this is a 12-inch time timer you're seeing on the screen. They sell them in smaller sizes. I literally move the red to 5 minutes, and then it counts down. So at the end of 5 minutes, 3 beeps go off, and then you go on. Because we often, as facilitators, say you have 5 minutes, and then it ends up being 10 minutes.
Or 50.
Or 50 minutes. And so the time timers here, you can buy them on Amazon. There's a wide variety of them. This is the one that I have. I have a set of 3 of these, a 12, an 8-inch, and a 3-inch. I actually use them both myself and Iskis have them on our desks so that if we're doing a Pomodoro, I don't hear the tick, tick, tick of a kitchen timer. Instead, this just slowly goes away and then beeps at me at the end. And this is a travel version, reminds me of those old travel alarm clocks that just fold up and go from there. So the time timer is my tool as both a facilitator and to keep me focused. Because you might have picked up in this podcast, I have an inability to focus. Thank you for your giggle, Gab.
What I find funny is how you were showing us how good you were at muting and unmuting yourself. I would almost say showing off how good you were.
Before the show, yeah.
You're like, look how amazing I am.
But it only works when it is your top window. And
Right.
my problem is it hasn't been my top window.
So just excuses.
Now it is my top window.
Thank you, Jill. Gab, what's your tool?
My tool is it's called the Noun Project, and it's their slogan is icons for everything, and they have almost 2 million curated icons, really clean, nicely done icons. It's free. Of course, you can pay for it if you want to use it in print material, but often I get from people asking me, how did I create my presentations for for when I'm a speaker on Keynote and et cetera. And a lot of times I use the Noun Project. So if you're trying to spice up a brochure or look a little bit more professional on Instagram, I use this program because the Noun Project, because they're great. Have some really great material there.
And cool stuff to add into your staff training presentations to spice them up too, to use some images in creative ways there instead of just being super text heavy presentations for staff training.
That's right. Really, really clean and easy images. And a lot of times when I'm creating my own presentations and I'm looking for images, it's what helps me keep my thoughts organized, because you don't want to bombard people with a lot of text. So how can you find images that represent that? Helps me keep my message also succinct, which is good for my staff.
Yep. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Gab. My tool is the Wyze camera, WYZE. It is a home security camera. They're interior cameras that have some outdoor solutions. It could maybe be used for live streaming if you wanted to have here's here's the bus circle and the campfire or the flag at our camp and in winter. But it also solved this problem that I tried so hard to solve in the internet's infancy that I could finally solve today. I wanted at camp for days when there's no one on site, I wanted there to be a motion sensor that would email me a picture of the license plate of every vehicle that drove on site. In case something happened, I'd have this record. And I could never pull it together in an inexpensive way that we could afford. And so this Wyze camera starts at $25 American. They have this pen zoom one that'll turn around, it'll look up and down, that is $35 American. So super cheap way. You don't have to pay a monthly service for them to store the video. You can put a card in there and it'll store days of video. You can set it to just record when it detects motion or when it just detects a sound. If you're away, it will email you when your smoke alarms go off or your CO alarms go off in your house. For that price, I was just stunned at the quality of it and how great it is. Beth and I have been playing around with, in the 24 hours I had one installed in our front window just to look at our door, and playing around with looking at all the funny things that it catches, including last night in the middle of the night, a spider went right in front of the lens. It looked like a spider the size of a city, but in the middle of the night, this spider just fell down in front of the lens, and it was so close to the lens, it covered the whole thing. I was like, whoa, holy cow, look at that. I'm sure it's just a tiny, tiny little spider, but so many possibilities.
So cool.
Live streaming is one thing. I'm uncomfortable with live streaming when there's kids in there, but I love the idea of live streaming when there's not kids there, or you want to be able to check in on a view from camp if you can't get there for a few days. It would be a great tool. And one of those things that at that price, you just have an app and you just pick a different camera and you can see the live view. And at that price point, you could just buy 6 of them and put them in places. You have to have internet access. It has to be accessible to Wi-Fi, but what a cool opportunity to hack together your own security system or give some different perspectives on camp throughout the year, because everybody's always so surprised to see camp without the leaves on, or camps, when buildings are being painted, stuff like that. It's a fun opportunity.
This is about to be dog cam for me when I was
Yes, exactly. And its original intent is sort of like a kid cam or a dog cam. And on the site they have a series of videos of dogs behaving badly, taken caught on the cameras, and cats too. Nice. But and a surprising number of pictures of black bears, videos of black bears. and the mischief they get into. See if I had this security system set up at camp like I wanted, I could have had a picture of the black bear that tore the whole utility room off the front of my house to get to the garbage when I'd been away for 10 days. And it pulled off a whole wall and pulled all the garbage out. How awesome would it be to have that picture of that nuisance bear?
Is that how you convinced Beth, saying, Beth, if we would have had this, we could have had this footage?
Well, I'll tell you that this camera falls below the purchase threshold. We have to have a conversation with Beth about it. That threshold's not particularly high in our family. No. Deservedly so. I will spend every day of the week. I'll buy new tools, but if this falls below that threshold, so show up. And yesterday, getting ready for designing staff training, and she's like, "What are you giggling about?" I was like, "Look at this thing on my phone." She's like, "That's the front window." I know. So if you have a boss or a board who sets a spending threshold beyond which you have to have permission, then
that threshold is $5,000. So
right, but you have earned that threshold too. So
you've earned it. Yeah,
I'm buying a lot of cameras. Just put them all up. We're gonna do like slow-mo shots, like The Matrix, set up with Waze cameras. Yeah,
right.
So cool.
Yeah,
we're going to become a production studio.
There you go. You just have a whole bank of all the images.
Yeah,
that's fun. Anyway, well, I thank you all. It's been a great discussion. We've gone a bit longer than I anticipated today, so thank you all for sticking around on this Thursday morning. And I want to give people a chance to Sorry, my fault there. If people want to get in touch with you, Joe, how can they follow up with you?
They can follow up with me in two ways. They can see camp and everything we do here at Pierce Williams at campisbetter.com. Life is good, camp is better. And they can find me. The best way is through the website, yoyojoe.com. I have some social media stuff, but I have been off it for a while. So just yoyojoe.com, and you can get contact stuff there.
Thanks for sharing today, Joe.
Not a problem. I want to apologize for my shirt. I won't wear the checkered shirt anymore. It's a very
on HD cameras.
Yeah.
Gab, how can people follow up with you if they have questions?
Well, you can check out where I work at Ouareau.com, which is OUAREAU. You can also follow me on Instagram, Gabrielle Rail with 2 L's, and Gabz, GABZ at Ouareau.com if you want to shoot me a little message.
Thanks so much, Gab. It's great to talk to you today. Ruby?
You can email me, ruby@rubyoutdoors.com. My website is also rubyoutdoors.com, and check out what I do and how I can help you. And you can follow me on Twitter, RubyLen85, or on Instagram, Ruby Outdoors. And stay tuned for a live stream of my dog, Murphy, because that's going to be
Love it.
You wait.
I love it.
That is great. Well, I'm thankful to all of you for being here and for all your contributions in general to the camp community. All three of you make such great contributions. It's the industry deserves to give you many thanks. So I'll pass on mine on behalf of the industry. I want to say also that if you're a subscriber to the podcast, you can download the podcast for free on your phone. Just use one of the apps that we talked about today and just set it up to automatically download. We know that we're not super regular. We're trying to be a bit more regular this spring. But that way the episodes just show up for you and get a magic surprise from the CampHacker crew. I want to acknowledge Oliver and Matt who've been doing the First Class Counselor insert into the CampHacker feed. And we intend to do a few more of those this year. And they're all built to be so that you can just say, give the link to your counselors and say, before you arrive, please listen to this. And there's going to be in a variety of topics, but all focused on how to help them be better counselors. So if you want that free resource, just send them the links to the First Class Counselors. They are at the same place that the CampHacker podcast is. So go to camphacker.tv/podcast, and you'll see the First Class Counselors mixed into this feed. And we've done that very intentionally on purpose. So thanks to Matt and Oliver for their work on that. And if camp directors have other lessons that they want us to get across to their counselors before they arrive for the summer, please email me, travis@gocamp.pro, and I'll pass that on to Matt and Oliver as they are working on future shows as well. I would like to say thank you to Matt for being our editor and producer. He does a ton of work to get the show together, and we're super grateful. This episode in particular is going to be a lot of work for Matt, so thanks, Matt. I also want to say, hey, Rebecca. Rebecca is our newest patron, and so her support and many others pay for Matt to do the work that he does. So if you're getting good stuff out of the show, then I would urge you to go check out CampHacker on Patreon, patreon.com. And even $1 a month makes a big difference if we get enough people to do that to help us cover Matt's work. And we're also working on a project to get all of our past episodes transposed. Not transposed, that's changing the key. Getting them all. And I'm
Just
like,
That'd be interesting.
we're going to put them all.
Welcome to CampHacker. My name's Joe.
Transcribed. We're getting all of our podcasts transcribed. It's an ongoing project, but that also comes out of our patrons as well. So Rebecca, thank you. You're awesome. We're grateful that you're supporting CampHacker, and that's great. Thank you all for being amazing camp people and being the kind of camp mavericks who work hard on their personal development, work hard on their professional development. And we appreciate you. We're heading into a lot of camp conferences coming up soon. We hope that you'll all come by and say hello. If you tell us that you're a CampHacker listener, I will have a sticker for you, guaranteed. And all of us really enjoy the feedback that we get from conferences, so I'd encourage you to do that as well. All right. Thanks for the evening, friends.